welcome everybody to Tuesday tutorials. This is the first of several series like this. We wanted to start with vegetables because this Saturday our mock and tell build challenge is something vegetable related, cell phone size. So Tiffy had the great idea that the first installment of our tutorial would be related to that topic. So a little bit of history first. As you can see, we've got some very ancient trees here. Those are from set 255 from 1966, produced by Samsonite, when Lego was having Samsonite produce their products. It's a kind of a remake of 252, which look very similar but have like painted brown stems and things like that, from 1958. Then getting into the more modern injection molded ones, we've got like the 1970s, early 70s, later 70s, and then this little guy here is from 2000. But you can see kind of the transition into the more modern product. These don't even have anti-studs on them, so they won't even actually stick to anything. But it's interesting to see the history. So there's a lot of different types of vegetables, right? There's lots of different styles, different colors. Now there's more colors than ever. It used to be just this very regular green, which is now referred to as dark green, even though that's dark green, but we won't go there. So lots of bushes and shrubs and things, but I've always found it's more fun to brick build your vegetables. So we've got a whole bunch of different things here. Obviously the ones that are single piece from Lego. Then they've got some of these Easter or kind of springtime flowers. This was one from 2 years ago or so. And this particular one I used to make my flowers, used as a model of that method to make my flowers with some adjustments. This I thought was kind of cute because they include a newer leaf style on the stem. So you can see there's a lot of progression, way more stuff that you can do now, but brick building them is and always has been a lot more fun, for me at least. So, yes, Johnny, that will mess me up. Excellent. That's funny. So, there's a couple things I want to show everybody today. I thought it would be prudent to do some simple stuff. I know everybody might not have access to all of the parts currently, so I tried to keep it pretty simple. Even these brick-built trees are very simple. They only have the parts that you see in front of you, and same thing with the corn. The bushes that I designed for the Library of Alexandria that Nick and I built a ton of. So I want to just go through a couple of those things today. Obviously there's tons more. There's all kinds of stuff with the flowers, different styles, different ways of building those, different ways of creating the stalks, those kinds of things. So we'll try and get through a bunch of different things that I think are really fun and easy to do. And then we'll talk about just how you want to do things, or ideas that you have that maybe need a little guidance on some building techniques. So that's what this is. If you want to learn a thing, I'll teach you the way that I do it. There's always more than one way to do it. My way is not always necessarily the right way. It's just what works for me, and you always have to find what works for you. So if you would, in the chat, which Tiffy is so graciously monitoring, what do you want to see first? You want to see corn? You want to see these like Roman shrubbery trees? What do you want to see first? And then Tiff, you can let me know.
So, when you say chat, it doesn't have a chat attached to it. But let's jump into the tutorials channel for that.
That would be great.
If anybody has
I think people were chatting in like LUG meetings, but tutorials is fine.
Yeah, I was keeping an eye on LUG meetings, but we're having a tutorial, so I'll keep an eye on both.
Okay. Val's on the ball. She's on it.
Big trees!
Val says, big trees. Screw all this little crap. Okay. We can do big trees first. Let me get set up. So, just gonna move that over there. And move that over there. All right, so that's where we're gonna put our big tree when we're done. What you can see here is I've got a couple versions that I spun up earlier today. I've never built this particular style before, so I thought it would be fun to do and just see how it comes out. I'm actually really happy with the way it came out. It came out really well considering it's so few parts and not that complicated. As you can see from the base, I did two things, right? So we have on this side with the lighter green, we've got a brick-built stump or brick-built base of the tree here. On the other side with the blue spruce kind of dark blue, dark green, hunter green leaves, what I did was I inverted a barrel with like a flag pin in the middle of it on top of a 1x1 round jumper plate. So I can show you what that looks like. I just go ahead and pop that guy off of there. So basically, if you didn't have the parts to brick build the trunk of the tree, the stump here, or the lower section, all I did was I found one of these in a bin and just put it on top of a center pin. It's a 1x1 2x2 round plate jumper and the 1x1 flag pin, and then just turn the barrel over, and it makes a nice sturdy tree base, right? So if you didn't have all the slopes and different dark browns and light browns, you could do that. And then because these 2x2 round brick with the Technic axle hole just fit right over it, it's pretty easy to put that on there, like so. Cool. So that's just two versions of this. What it is it's a series of layering, right? So it's more of those 2x2 cylinders with these 2x2 round plate with this bar all the way around, the 8-sided bar, the octagonal bar. So it's 2x2s and plates, and then 2x2s and plates all the way up, okay? In addition to that, just gonna mosey them on over here. In addition to that, we've got the large 5x7 or whatever this is, the large foliage piece, probably 50 of those. You don't necessarily need 5 of these. Both of those trees that I showed you there are 4. You can use a 5th one if you want to fill in the top a little bit more, but it's not necessary, so 4 of those. And then at the top, I'm using 3 of these 1x1 brick with the studs on all sides. You'll see how those are used in a minute. Then to connect all of the foliage pieces to the plates, we've got these 1x1 plates with the clip. These were on the pick brick wall, So I have like a bag of about 8,000 of them, which they're not exactly the same green, but once you put them inside, you really don't notice it. And then at the top, to kind of cap this off, you have a couple options. You can do the cone, the 1x1 round cone, or the 1x1 round cylinder, depending on how you want it to look, what your preference is like. And then inside connecting it is just a 5L staff piece. And then I did two different things. So on the taller light green one, I finished it off, instead of using the big pieces to finish it off, I finished it off with two of the smaller foliage pieces to wrap around and bent at angles so that it would cover a little bit nicer. If you didn't have the right color, for example, I didn't have this piece in the dark blue or in the hunter green color, so instead I just finished it with more of the large size pieces. Either way works for this design. And then the last part that I used for this, the only other piece that's in here, which is really cool, and I was thinking about how I might want to do this, and I got saved by the bell in terms of having this part available to me. So the CMF, the new DC Superheroes CMF collectible minifig series, comes with two of these. I don't know if you can even see it on the video, but two of those clear pieces. And what it is just a 1x1 round stud with an angled arm. And that angled arm is responsible for the entire top of both of these trees. And it works really, really well. I didn't think about it until today when I built these, and I'm super happy with the way it worked out. So let's get started. What we're gonna do first, obviously I'll show you how I built the trunk first, and then we'll start attaching the leaves. As far as the base goes, you can use anything for the base. I do kind of like the 2 or 3 brick high smaller cone. I don't have any in brown. I've got them in gray and black and everything else, but I didn't have any in brown. But I like the way that flares out if you're not going to brick build your tree base or tree trunk. And again, this is just one option. I've seen people brick build their tree trunks out of the robot arms and the black hatchets, and like interlace them with one another all the way up, and it looks really cool. But the black hatchets are hard to come by right now, so I figured I would just keep it simple. But you can go crazy with this. So the height of this piece doesn't really matter. It could be whatever you want it to be. But once you start adding these plates, you've got to make sure that you have at least 2 of the 2x2 round bricks in between each one. Now when you get to the top, you can drop it down to 1, but as far as the initial sections go, you want to make sure that you have at least 2 bricks height between those. We'll do 4, and then we'll go 1 here. So, basic formula is whatever you want. The octagonal plate 2, octagonal plate 2, octagonal plate 2, octagonal plate, and then finish it with either 1 or 2 round bricks on the top. We can start building the rest of the trunk now, or we can do some of the leaf sections now. The leaf sections are a bit repetitive, so you know, we'll try and talk through some of that as we're going. But you can do it in either order. It really doesn't matter. So just to get us started. So the key with this is, and if you've seen the other trees that I'm using as the example here, the bottom layers up to a certain point, the leaf sections are actually upside down. So instead of, you know, we think of our construction most of the time it's studs up. Well, this is going to be anti-studs up, all the way up to a certain point, okay? And the reason for that is we're taking the 1x1 clip and adding it to the leaf section, right, with the clip in the horizontal position. So if there was a bar here and you were going to clip it on, that's what we're going to do here, okay? So on each section of this octagon, you're going to add 1 leaf. So it's 8 leaves and 8 clips per layer, okay? What I did in these other 2 trees is I used alternating colors. So for this demonstration, I'm just using the same color for all of them, but for the other ones, I used a 2-tone, a light green and a dark green for the green one, and then the hunter green and the blue, the dark blue, for the blue spruce tree. So you don't necessarily have to alternate, but I thought it would look cool, and I think it's pretty neat when you have both colors. But just for the sake of showing you, we're going to do one solid color. So were I alternating, I would be doing the 4 sides of the tree in one color, and then on the alternating sides I would do a different color. And once you get your first 4 in here, because of the space that this takes up when you add the next one, it's not going to lay flat the way these are, because this is taking up some of the same real estate that those are, right? So it actually helps you out. For the bottom layer, you don't want it to be sticking straight out. You want them to kind of angle, and that's the reason I did it this way, is so that you can pitch these leaves down to whatever angle you want. When you do this, and what I learned from doing it the first time is, if you think of a normal tree, the lower down the trunk, the more straight out the leaves stick, right? So as you go up the trunk, they tend to hang angular a little bit more. So I try to mirror that with this, right? So for the very bottom layer, I try to keep them not straight out, but a little bit less angle. And then you'll see when I add the next layer, it naturally pushes the 2 adjacent to it down, but not so far down that it's parallel to the trunk of the tree. So that's all I'm doing. 8 per section, right? Add the clip in the horizontal position, put it in between, and you can angle these down a little bit yourself if you want to give it a little bit more of a steeper angle. So I didn't do the Chef Julia Child thing where like I have the souffle already baked. You're gonna have to watch me do this whole thing, unfortunately. So sorry, but it goes pretty quick. So I'll set my first layer. I'll make sure all my studs and anti-studs are making good contact, and that's it from there. Now, if you wanted to fill this in more, and you weren't going to rely on the angle of the leaves to control how much of the trunk is visible inside this tree, right? If you wanted to fill it in more, I would recommend taking the smaller leaf and attaching it in places in between. You could alternate large and small depending on how you wanted to do it, but for this particular design, I'm using the pitch of the leaves themselves to control how much is visible, okay? So we'll go up to the next level. Same thing. You're gonna do 8 all the way around. Even though I'm not alternating colors, I am still doing the 4 quadrants before I go in between them. And again, that's because once you push down on one of the leaves in between the 4 cardinal directions, when you push down on the leaves in between 2 of those, it will cause them to pitch downward. Like so. That one's a little angry, like me. Cool. So you can start to see it kind of taking shape, right? And as you go, if you see like there's gaps and everything, and the great part about this design is that it's not perfect. There are definite patterns. When you look at it, you can see that, you know, one direction is lower than the other direction. So there's definitely patterns. You could alternate that by in between the two brick sections and the plate above it, you could put that that tile that has the hole in the center, that 2x2 round tile that's got the hole in the center. You could put one there, and then put you know, pins like these all the way through, so that you could still affix this, but then you could rotate it to alternating degrees. It wouldn't just be plus and crisscross, right? But again, trying to keep it simple. So actually that technique of rotating is what I do with my flowers, so that the leaves are offset. We'll keep going. 3 or 4 cardinal directions. I think I gave myself enough of these, otherwise I'm gonna have to get up and get more. Should be enough. Once we get past this part, we won't be using the clips anymore, and that's when we switch from upside down to right side up. So I'm just gonna pitch those down a little bit there, and we'll go in between. As you can see, I'm working my way around. And if you bend them down a little bit farther than you like, you can easily lift them up. That's the great thing about being on the clip, is that they'll rotate. And they hold pretty true. A little variability there. All right, last one. As you get your way up the tree, they tend to open up a little bit more. So I tend to angle them more so that there's less dead space in between if you're looking at it straight on. Tiffy, remind me for the next installment of this, should have like music or something. Nobody wants to listen to me the whole time.
Roger that.
Cool. All right, come on. Again, for anybody that's just joining us, it's a large foliage piece with a 1x1 clip in a horizontal position. And it's just snapping on there. Cool. Right. So, that's a good start. So what are we going to do next, right? I was playing with a couple different ideas, trying to figure out what I wanted to do to make the top of the tree taper. And I tried the technique where you take the two leaf sections and you like wedge them in between one another. The thing that Matt Healy and I had tried, and it just looked like crap. So I DX'd that idea and said, well, let me come up with some other ideas. Let me figure out something that's going to work here for this design. So what I found was 3 of these, plus 1 bow staff, 5L stick, and then capped off with either a cone or a cylinder in the same color. I think the cone actually looks a little bit better, so I'll probably use that one. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to put the 3 of these together so that they're all lined up, right? And now the center one you're going to keep straight up and down, and the 2 end ones you're going to rotate 45 degrees like that so that they're offset. The one in the center is sticking straight out, left and right, back and forward, and the top and the bottom one are offset to that, okay? Now it's not going to stay on top. I suppose I could put that same plate I showed you earlier with the 1x1 round jumper, a 2x2 round plate with the 1x1 jumper. Could do that and then stick this on the center, but I found that this is a little bit more sturdy. It keeps the bricks together. So I'm going to send that through there, cap it off with the cone, and then I'm going to press it down into the 2x2 round brick until it posts up almost to the top of the cone or cylinder if you use the cylinder. Now that's pretty solid, okay? The great thing about this is you can rotate the whole thing around. So if you don't like the way the leaves are falling, the top section here, you can totally move that to alternate it from the pattern below, okay? So this is the fun part. This is why I love this DC Superheroes blind pack, the little minifig packs, because each one of those comes with 2 of these, and for whatever reason, the Green Lantern and the Sinestro Yellow Lantern come with 4. I think 2 might be the alternate clip, but this piece...
Cam?
Yes?
Do you mind just putting it a little closer to the camera? I'm curious on that piece.
I would be more than happy to. Can you see that?
And what's the other end?
So the one end is a round 1x1 stud, and the other end is just a regular pin, just like the one you saw me put a regular size staff, but it's at an angle. So it comes up just a hair and then it turns. And the reason being that those DC Comics superheroes minifigs are all meant to be like in flight or taking action or doing something. So this sits in a 1x2 jumper plate, and then their legs, the bottom of their feet stick to this, or the bottom of their leg can stick to it, it can be on the back. I used one of these in my Ninjago building from the March Build Challenge so that I could have Kai in the Buddha shrine floor, like kneeling down with his offering. And I used one of these, actually trimmed it a little bit. Don't tell Dorner, he'll be mad at me. But I trimmed it a little bit so that it would be less of a height, okay?
No, thank you.
You got it, you got it. So that's that piece. It's really cool. I didn't have an idea of how I was gonna do this. And then I thought about this piece and I said, you know what, let me give it a shot, and it's great, it's brilliant. So, up until this point, we've been upside down, anti-studs up. From this point forward, we're gonna be studs up, okay? So, you can take this off and put all these in, and then put it back on. I like to just kind of do them as I go because I can rotate this whole thing. So I'm gonna put them in with the shaft piece going into the 1x1 multi-directional stud there, and the 1x1 round plate sticking up on a 45-degree angle, okay? So I'm gonna go all the way around. Difference between the lower levels and this, there's only 4 per, but that's okay because it's more compressed and you have more above it than you do with the spacing below. So I've got my first layer, right? My first layer of 4 there. Now I'm gonna take my large foliage piece and I'm gonna attach it to that stud that's sticking out. You can angle them, you can set them in between other studs, whatever you're comfortable with, however you want it to look. But I'm gonna put that in there. And the great thing about these too is you can rotate them. So if I wanna cant this a little bit, I can rotate that to the side. And then when I put my leaf on, the leaf will be canted as well at that same angle. And you can do that. Now for this demonstration, I kind of just had them all pitching down, but you can generally do that in any direction, which is great. Actually, I might pop that off just so that you can see that. So the first one here is just straight down. The one in front there, you can see, is a little bit turned up like that. Okay? Probably gonna give me a hard time. No. Oh, look at that. Good. Cool. So let's get the other two on. Same thing. Put them at whatever angle you want. Get those guys on there. Right. Now, same thing. Again, the spacing's different than it was. Now you're a lot closer. So your next row is going to be tighter. I'm trying not to rotate it because I don't want to knock anything off, but you can rotate it as you put these around if you don't put the leaves on first. So, to do this part, you need 12, yeah, 4, 8, 12 of these. I think I've got a few more than that here, just in case I, chuck a few off the table, which is always a possibility. Cool. The second layer of the top section is going to be more of the same, right? It's in between. The layer is below it, so it has a nice coverage where you're not really seeing a lot of the what would be the tree branches or the trunk of the tree. Now when you get to the top layer, the very last layer, you have a choice to make, okay? Either you're going to narrow it down by using the smaller leaves, or you're going to finish it off by using the larger leaves. So in the case of the example that I gave earlier, right, on this one, I wrapped the tree with pairs of the smaller leaves. And on this one, what I ended up doing was just having 2 of the large sections of leaves pitching down and then the other 2 pitching up to kind of like crisscross one another at the top. Both look pretty good. It's really up to you, your personal preference, so I'll show you both. If you're gonna go strictly large leaves, again, that's 2 with the, if you consider this the top, I would say the top is facing up. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the center of each large leaf, and instead of putting the end on the 1x1 round, you're going to put the center on it. You can't go straight up and down because they'll collide when you put them on there. So you've got to turn one to one side and one to the other so that they just kind of overlap a little bit. So it'll be like that and that. And that is that's it. If you do it that way, you're done with your big leaves. It tapers nicely with the cone underneath, and it looks pretty good all the way around. Again, if you're not crazy about the gaps, you feel like you can see the clear pieces, or you can see the black one by one with the multi-stud face on it. If you're not crazy about that, you can fill in more branches, right? You can easily add more branches above or below, and the fact that they're anti-stud facing up on the bottom kind of makes that even easier, okay? If you didn't want to do the top of your tree with the large leaves, you can still do the smaller ones, okay? It'll be 2 per. So what I did on the example that I showed you was I had 1 facing up and 1 facing down. And just like with the larger leaves, because they will collide if you put them straight up and down, A, that doesn't look as good, and B, they will intersect and push each other off. You've got to kind of camp them a little bit, turn them a little bit, right? So I start with the bottom ones, facing those downward, a little bit of an angle. You can turn those how you want to. And then take my last 4, and I'll have them at opposite or alternating angles, and I'll kind of just turn it so that I knock it off while I'm trying to show you. So you can kind of interlock them a little bit. You don't have to. Also, too, if you find that they're colliding a little bit too much, you can rotate them so that the larger sections on the top, it just gives it a different angle. Let's see if I can get this going. And there we go. So that's a little bit more complicated. It's a little bit more difficult, but it might give you a different look that you might want to be going for as opposed to just the large sections. Once you do this, you have to be really careful because they're easy to knock off. But what I like to do is after I get my top situated the way I want it to, I'll try and like lift my leaves all the way around just a little bit and kind of position them in ways that make it look a little bit more natural. So really cool thing. I've never seen anybody do this. I'm sure somebody has, but it's not rocket science, obviously. I didn't invent the Lego that you see before you, but I came up with this today. It was a lot of fun. And the only thing that I'll say about this is you have to realize the scale that you're working with, right? Your scale is really important. So if you are building, no pun intended, if you're creating big buildings like this, this could potentially be, get the flowers out of my way, this could potentially be the type of tree scale that you want to work in, because it makes sense. The trees are going to be about the size of a house, height-wise. Could be smaller, whatnot. If you're working in gardens or you're trying to go smaller scale, obviously you can scale it down. Anybody that came to the Wadsworth Athenaeum for our Festival of Trees shows know that our mountain was covered in these types of trees, right? Because it made sense. It was scaled to that. But a giant city that has trees growing in it might be more this scale. The same thing can be said as you go up and up and up and up, right? When you look at like these flowers. These flowers are what I would consider approximate human scale, right? Not minifig or Lego scale. These are the kinds of things that if you had flowers in a vase, obviously I'm using an actual vase, I know. Sorry, Matt Healy, I'm being lazy. I could brick build one, but this is the approximate size of what those flowers would look like if they were actually in this vase. And it is Lego water. So scale is really important. And you can see I've already shown this a little bit, but the water garden, the Japanese water garden that sits next to my building, the goal was to show vegetation, but not at a scale that was ridiculous to kind of the space and the area, right? So some vines growing here, bamboo growing in the front, down by the water, some lily pads, that kind of stuff. So that's the appropriate scale for this type of display. Could go bigger, could go smaller. I've seen smaller. I've seen people use these just for trees, which, you know, we're talking micro scale at that point. So if you're doing micro scale builds, that's the size of your tree right there. So lots of different options. But this was really fun. I enjoyed doing that. Coming up with that today kind of broke my day up a little bit. And it seems to be, you know, decently sturdy. I don't know about that barrel one. That one's got a little wibble wobble there. But the one we just built is pretty good. And I feel like, you know, between 50 leaves and a few 2x2 round pieces and, you know, a couple other pieces in there, it's not all that complicated to put together. You could easily find all those parts on Bricklink. Some of them might even be on the pad wall. Pick a brick wall when it's open again. But that's the tree. Questions?
First off, fantastic.
Thanks.
We love the trees. Comments in the chat. Val says, love big trees. Thanks, Cam. And also, yay trees for Terry.
Yay trees.
So we're going to open up the floor now. Anybody who wants to jump in, turn their voice chat on and comment or ask questions, go for it.
Everybody's still on mute.
Ivan, did you want to chime in?
No, I was going to say something, but I changed my mind.
Oh, come on, say it.
I don't know.
Can you go back to step 4?
Oh my god.
Back to step 4. I don't know what step 4 was. We'll have to look at the video afterwards, buddy.
By the time I'm done editing, I'll be able to tell you that.
Yes.
I may actually put steps in there.
Totally fine. Works for me.
You should design your own building instructions as well. If that's okay.
Okay. In my infinite free time, I'll work on that.
Yeah. No, I want to say thank you very much. While you were giving us this tutorial, I actually was rummaging through parts, seeing if I had all the similar parts for it, like the little rounds for the trunk.
Yep.
I guess what I found, what I'm looking at, is I could get away with not. You can get away with, obviously. I haven't used. You could use any color brown. You could almost get away with using a different 1x1 stud, you know, with a little hook thing to hold on to the little octagonal piece.
So those
because the leaves covered enough for me, at least, I saw from an angle.
Yep.
You can't see the color of the little pin.
No.
So if you don't have the color of leaves, you could just grab a black or a brown or.
Yeah, I would try and.
I was using a gray one.
Try and keep it to like a lighter neutral color if you can. It'll just blend better. It's you know, when you think about like camouflage, it's usually like dark greens, light greens, grays, browns, those kinds of colors. So it'll blend within the other colors that you're using. Even the blue spruce. I don't know if you can see one of these. Even the blue spruce is using those same clips, the 1x1 clips, and it's very hard to actually see them through the leaves. I think the darker colors kind of lend to camouflaging that a little bit more. But yeah, you could use whatever you needed.
Yes.
Cool.
Hey Cam, I had a question.
You're welcome.
Alright, see you guys later. Bye.
Thank you. Go ahead, Shane.
Go ahead, Shane.
I jumped in a little late. Are you using like a Technic pin to support the middle of the tree or anything?
No, but you could. If when we started, I was talking about how I don't like just having the 2x2 round brick go straight to the deck because it doesn't, it looks a little fake. Certainly I like the tapered one a little bit more, but all of those, including the little 2 or 3 stud high tapered one, 3 brick high tapered one, they all have the Technic axle hole throughout them, including these. So if that was a concern, if you found that they were a little wibbly wobbly, actually I had to take one of these out because it was suffering from brittle brown, and one of the ends had kind of snapped off, so the clutch power was gone. But you could easily run a Technic axle all the way through, right up until the part where the that staff, that 5L staff, has to fit down into the top one, whichever one it is. And the other thing I forgot to mention, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, is that when you get to the top, you can do 1 or 2, depending. You could also cap it off with an extra row if you felt like it didn't quite fill in all the way up. The reason I didn't was because I wanted it to taper more. So hypothetically, you can finish it off with that, a 2 or a 1, and have a Technic axle run all the way through all of them. Good question, Shane.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
Any more questions?
Not a question, but I like the way she uses EMF little clips for the top of the tree.
Oh yeah.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, that worked out really well.
I have a question that's unrelated. Well, it's related to veggies, but it's not related to how you built that tree. I have old the old pond tree bodies that were like pop sockets that could bend. Do they
Yep.
make those anymore?
That's a good
Nope.
question. I don't think those are in production anymore.
Oh, okay.
Brian?
Yeah, that's why you see all the trees now are based off of Technic rods and everything. They got rid of those pop socket trees, gods,
A while
15
ago.
years ago or so.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
15, 20 years ago. Yeah. They were great though, but
Yeah.
that's a bricklink thing now.
Yeah. Everybody always has like 3 or 4 of those in their collection. It's always like just enough to not make a tree.
Yeah, I always loved those things.
I know, they're great.
Oh, they're great.
Yeah, I think we've got a couple from our childhood Lego. So my question with these trees is I saw you use like the funky little pieces that came from the minifigs.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an alternate way to attach leaves at the top that doesn't use those? Because I think that I own maybe one of them.
Yeah, so yes, there is. Getting the angle right is difficult, but there's lots of different ways to do it. Some people use the plates with the bar and the plates with the clip, and will clip them together and sandwich them between bricks to make angles, and then just snap the put the anti-stud on wherever that falls. So the little bar that's got the round, it's like a 1x1 round, and you can just hinge them basically. So you could do that. I guess you could do it with the bar, like a 3L bar just running straight through the brick, and then you could affix these and kind of like bend them a little bit, which it'll work. I don't know how long it'll stay, but if you did it on a bar and ran the bar through the opening, then it would stay pretty well. But then you'd be bending your foliage leaves. So
Bring out the really big tree.
the really big tree.
Really big tree.
I was so excited to make corn though.
Oh, but I want to see the corn though.
Okay, corn first.
All
Corn
right.
first.
Real quick then.
Okay.
The really big tree. So this is a very different technique. So this I built as a prototype to one that I want to scale up. so that when my lug bulk shows up, that I have enough to make a tree that's like yay round, trunk-wise. Anybody that's seen my gherkin building from London has seen the size that I want to do with that. But this was a fun build. This does use Technic connectors. It uses the same 2x2 round bricks that you saw in these other trees, but they're connected to angular Technic connecting pieces, including one in this very center that is the tri-directional. It looks like the flux capacitor, and it's a Technic piece, and then it's got angle pieces coming out of that at different angles to create this. Same thing when I got to the top of the branches. The very top is a Technic pin and axle that's wedged into the 2x2 round brick, and then there are more angular Technic connectors coming off of that to create different framed angled leaves. These are also the large foliage pieces, but on most of the surfaces that have studs, or even on some of the anti-studs, I stuck these new modern leaf pieces on to give it a little bit more of a full depth to it. Cool?
Glorious trees, Empire. Glorious trees.
Thank you. All right,
To the corn!
to the corn and all the children that are in it. This is,
I am so familiar with this corn.
yes, Terry knows all about the corn, because the poor thing had to build many of them at Brick Fair.
Alright, let the woman speak.
Bye. Well, that's gone. Let me harvest one. Thanks. All right, so I just lost one of my 1x1 rounds, but that's okay. We'll improvise. So all this corn is 4 of these OG kind of stem stalk pieces, 3 alternating green 1x1 round studs, a 1x1 round stud that should be in the correct color, but it's not because I just lost the one I needed, and then a cone to cap that off, right? So very simple, although very tedious. I struggled for a long time trying to get this stud down onto that stem and get it in there, and then I had the genius idea that if I just put it on the bottom of the other one, it's much easier to put them together. So you're just alternating stud and stem, so that there's a stem on the bottom and a stud in between, followed by a 1x1 round plate of your choosing and a cone of your choosing. Sits down in there, and then you snap it in half like that. Because, you know, She-Hulk. There you go. It's very corny.
Thank you.
I know we're about time right now. It's been an hour.